Welcome to Windows on the World. Today I'm talking to David Kurten, who is the leader of the Heritage Party in the UK, and we're going to get into what the Heritage Party is really about. So David, welcome.
Thank you. Really good to be with you.
Yes, well, it's good to catch up because I've been following what the party's been doing in the manifesto. Can you first of all give us a little background of how you got into the position you're in at the moment? Because you've got a bit of a history, haven't you, with politics?
Yeah, look, I don't know how far to go back, but I guess I'll start right at the beginning and why I got involved in politics. It was about 10 years ago, really. And I was concerned about the European Union and that entity taking democracy away from the people and imposing control systems and so on. And I was also concerned about political correctness, which I now more fully understand to be cultural Marxism, what people call wokery, but really it's an organized system that has been going on and been developing for 100 years or so. So, the parties in Parliament, the Conservatives, I call the fake Conservatives, Labour, Lib Dems, Greens, they were all just pushing political correctness. There was no alternative. So actually, about 10 years ago, I joined UKIP because they were the only party that seemed to be fighting both of those things at the same time. And I was elected, actually, after a few years of being in UKIP onto the London Assembly, which was fantastic. So my job for 5 years was to question Sadiq Khan, who was like a prime Remainer, fan of the EU, fan of the globalist system, fan of political correctness. And I was calling him out like every time I went into the meetings in the London Assembly, and challenging him on all of the ridiculous things he was saying. Sadly, after the referendum in 2016, that was a wonderful day because the people of Great Britain and Northern Ireland voted to leave the European Union. But then there was years of struggle to actually get something that was not the proper job at the end of the day. But also UKIP has imploded, and it's nothing. It's not even the same people that were there 5 years ago. So I left and I started the Heritage Party, basically to be a socially conservative party in the UK, to stand against political correctness, to stand for free speech, but also to affirm traditional family values and financial responsibility, controlling our borders, making sure young people are trained up with the skills they need in this country to survive and make a success of their lives, and all things that, I just generally considered to be common sense and what people would have thought was common sense 30 or 40 years ago. But in a system where all the parties and the mainstream media are just insane and just militating against normal, everyday common sense all of the time. So we need something to challenge that. So I thought, yeah, I'll start the Heritage Party. So we launched officially in autumn 2020. I stood in the London elections. We've stood in various by-elections since then. We've stood in some local elections in various places and the Northern Ireland Assembly as well. And, at the moment, we're just growing, where members are joining us. We're looking for more candidates. And I hope that we'll be able to make a good challenge in the next general election and also in the local elections on the 4th of May next year to the powers that be that are ruining our country. We want to restore our nation and do the opposite of what they're doing.
This is quite interesting, David. What are you finding is the response from the public? Because obviously there must be a huge amount of people that haven't got any voice anymore or feel they have no voice because of this basic infiltration that's been going on a long time. And it's something I've studied for many years. And the whole of the system has been completely and utterly taken over. So what sort of people are joining the Heritage Party and what sort of support are you getting?
Yeah, you're right. That's the long march through the institutions, really, that's taken over all of the other political parties, really, the powers that be. So a lot of people are politically homeless and they're looking for an alternative. And some people are coming to join us, which is fantastic. I tend to get a positive response wherever I go, which was wonderful from normal people. Obviously, there's some people who are, on the other side of things who are for political correctness correctness and wokery. I mean, they're not going to join, and they would be actively, ruining the country. But I think there's actually an overall majority of people who support our policies and principles. So we get a very, very positive response all over the place. But we're not yet at the point where a lot of people are willing to make a move. So I'm finding it's a little bit frustrating at the moment, because there's tens of millions of people who want to change, who are fed up with what's going on, but they need to make a move and come and join us and actually get actively involved as well. So, I hear some people saying, well, we're just fed up of politics. We're going to leave politics altogether. We're never going to have any change in politics. I think that's exactly the wrong attitude to take, because you got to get into it to change it. Nothing's going to change unless we make a challenge. And I'm trying to do that within the system that we've got. I mean, I know there are some people who've got the opinion that we just need to crash the system and build a new system. But the thing is, with that's
completely and utterly naive, though.
Yeah,
I mean, when people say things like that, they don't realize the way that the system actually works. There's a whole new system been brought in. And basically, what you're saying is completely against that. But it resonates, obviously, with a lot of people. But we've also got generations of people who've been mentored into this sort of sustainable development mentality, which is actually what it is. It all came through the sustainable development, the whole thing of what we call wokery and all this stuff. These are all UN initiatives. This is the whole global governance system, which has been brought into the UK for a long time. And people don't realize that the UK is fully infiltrated. And what people call cultural Marxism is Marxism. For instance, if you go to sort of countries that have lived under communism, when I say this sort of thing to people about this level of Marxist agitation in the UK, they're really horrified, because they know what it was like, because these tactics were used on them.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, going back into the history of cultural Marxism, it's the idea was to corrode and corrupt society from within, because they couldn't, it wasn't in the place to have a quick revolution in the 1920s. So this has been a very, very long march through the institutions, and a long corrosion and corruption of our values and our principles and our society. And as you say, people have got in, real Marxists have got into the media, the business, the educational institutions, the political parties, the civil service, the departments, at both a national level and a local level. And every local district and borough and county has got an Agenda 21 committee or an Agenda 2030 committee, which is there to try to implement the UN 17 Sustainable Development Goals, which are, economic Marxism, the Green New Deal, and so on. And then it's also cultural Marxism, that bringing it into the social aspects of society as well. So, for example, they talk about gender equality, but that doesn't mean even equality between men and women. No. It means, totally destroying the idea of biological sex and replacing it with whatever gender you want to be out of 100 different genders, and you can change them every day. And if you disagree with that, then you're going to be accused of a hate crime and so on. And
the post-truth world where the facts do not matter. And the thing is about these groups is that they're not really, they call them communities, you see. But when you start doing what they actually mean by that is that they empower people as biological weapons to use for divide and rule. That's basically what they're talking about. And they can weaponize groups to attack other groups. So there's no real difference between that and Antifa. There's no difference at all. It's the same concept. They're using people as biological weapons, and these people are doing it unknowingly because they think something's in it for them, or they identify with it, or they've been told that they should identify with it. And none of this is coming from what they call grassroots. There is no such thing now as grassroots in the UK. When they use the word grassroots, it's always one of these organizations coming in for change. And that change is this new governance system, which people are starting to wake up to and realize. But the thing is that there are people who I think can still turn it round. And that's why I'm interested in talking to you about this, because you're up against a kind of tidal wave of this stuff, really. And what I tell people is that, look, it doesn't matter if the party doesn't win, or it's not about any of that stuff. It's that at least if you get a few seats here and there, you can start influencing, and that would make, I think, a big difference. So I don't subscribe to the general party politics of the Labour Conservative flip-flop between the two of them and the Lib Dems in the middle. You see, the thing is, it's all about grasping the sort of the mood out there. And if people get this idea that, well, you've got to vote, what are you going to use it for? There's no point voting for any of the others. You're the only one saying anything different. And that is, to me, the issue, because all this stuff about people saying, well, we want the end of the political system. Well, that's exactly what the globalists want, because that means you won't have any say anymore. And that is the end goal of remote authority that is imposing draconian system onto the people. And that is what they used to call communism. It's now communitarianism. They've now designated anything that imposes this stuff as the community, when in fact it's them. There is no community. There is no community engagement. And once people realize that, then they go, okay, well, maybe we can use the vote for something. Even if they don't like you, even if it's a lever, you see. This is my point when I try and talk about this stuff. But even that seems to be slightly too sophisticated for some people to get. They will still go into personal things and say, well, he's this and he's that. So none of that is irrelevant. It's about, he's standing against Agenda 2030. That's the lever in, you see. And I try and keep it really simple. How do you cope with all this stuff when you're going around talking to people? Because obviously you're keeping it on a simplistic level. But what you're up against is actually, I wouldn't say it's above the heads of people, but I don't think they realize how serious the situation is.
Yeah, I mean, what I say to people is, I get this a lot of time. People say, well, there's no point in getting involved in politics because it's all corrupt. It's not going to change. Yeah, like you said, they are actually then deceived into being almost useful idiots, if you like, that are going to be, agents, not willing, but, people that will bring about the crash of the system and this utopian idea of bringing in sort of local people's assemblies or something. But like you said, you've got hundreds of thousands of change agents who are ready to just swamp those new people's assemblies if they ever get set up.
Well, they're run by those people. The citizens' assemblies were suggested by Extinction Rebellion. Extinction Rebellion is just a radical group of this system. They are basically just a tool of sustainable development, but they have tools on both sides. So this is the thing people don't realize, is that citizens' assemblies run on Delphi technique, which uses facilitators, which brings in private companies. For instance, the one in Oxford, which has brought in this draconian stuff that's happening now, those people on that citizens' assembly were led. And first of all, Clyde Lokes, who's a change agent from Walthamstow, who brought in the mini Holland schemes there, was sent to Oxford, and it was then rebranded as Livability. And they started doing it there. But that all started off with a so-called consultation of a citizens' assembly on climate change. And Oxford was the first one, and I covered it in some detail. And what the whole premise was, you could not question anthropogenic global warming. You had 3 days, I think, of indoctrination with Miles Allen, a computer modeler from Oxford University, not somebody who knows much about the climate at all, somebody who produces computer models. Computer models are 100% wrong all the time. None of what they've ever predicted has ever come true. The IPCC, that's the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. So that's what they mean by a citizens' assembly. They don't mean it's you making the choice. It's them making the choice and making it look like you're making the choice.
It's a huge deception, isn't it? It's not real democracy, or it's not real people power. And that's why I think I want to work within the system, because I can see crashing the system and building up something new. It's not going to work. It's, it's going to be even worse than what we've got now. And it all depends on who's got control, because whatever system you've got, whether it's this one or a new one, as you say, you've got hundreds of thousands of people who are working to bring in this new system of global governance on a national and a local level, and push all of the agendas, the Agenda 2030, the climate agenda, the COVID agenda, the cultural Marxist agenda. They're all doing this at whatever level. It's like you're fighting 20 different battles all at the same time.
Well, it's all the same one, David. It's all the same one, isn't it? It's all the same thing. It's all leading in the same direction. All of these things are sort of accessories of change. They are all individual drivers which are used alongside each other. And what you do is then they get these things attacking people from all sides, so they get confused. And that's exactly what these Marxist groups do as well. Say, if you're in a crowd and you've got a voice that's against what's been said, then they will all surround you and start shouting in your face. It's the same. It doesn't matter whether it's on a personal level or whether it's on a government level. These tactics are all the same. And that's what I've found over the years. It's Saul Alinsky rules for radicals were brought in 2010 through the Cameron government. And once they were being trained, these change agents being trained in the public and private sector and put into the councils, things started to radically change, because you'd get these arrogant responses. Then they would feel that they had no liability for their actions and just cut you off. And I noticed how that had happened. And now the whole idea is they're making these mega councils, so that all these councils are conglomerating so that you will have no input locally. So the only way to do that is to try and infiltrate back, reverse infiltration, if you like. Or what they would say, they use the word reclaiming.
Indeed. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's two ways. You can either try to set up new institutions, but there's no, you can't in some ways. I mean, you can't set up like a new police service or a new set of courts. It's just, you've only got one police service, one set of courts. That's just not going to work. And even if you do set up a new institution, it will get infiltrated straight away. So we've just got to get the millions of people who are dissatisfied, who are politically homeless, who know and instinctively, feel that there's something wrong with our country, but they can't put their finger on it, and actually educate people to some extent, which is why I put out loads of YouTube videos. You do as well. You put out videos to educate people as to what's going on and lead people into actually saying, well, we can make a difference. And the only way I can see of really making a difference is to win elections. And it's not going to be easy, because this is, some people say to discourage me, oh, you're never going to win on the first past the post system. It's set up against you. Well, if you don't try, you're not going to win. But let's give it a go, and let's get people together, and let's get campaigns going and support each other. And we can do. And we may not win today or tomorrow, but a big oak tree, all the big oak trees that we got started as small acorns. You've got to start somewhere, and you might just be small at the moment, where our aim is to grow and grow and grow until we can potentially become the biggest country in the party and win all over the place, because I think there are 10 to 20 million people who would agree with what we're saying if they only heard about us and then got involved. So there's elections in the local areas in England and Northern Ireland on the 4th of May. We'll stand wherever we can, wherever we can put a candidate, we'll stand in those elections. And then there's going to be a general election sometime in the next 2 years. So we'll stand as many people as we can, but that depends on people getting involved and getting active, and actually them putting their head above the parapet and dedicating a little bit of time and energy just to stand in elections and get involved in politics. And it's not something you have to do for the whole of your life. I mean, you've got to fill in a few forms and hand them into the council, essentially. So if anyone can just give up 3 or 4 or 5 hours of their time to fill in a few forms, get a few signatures, and go to the council offices and hand them in, they can be on the ballot paper. And that at least gives people a choice to vote for someone who's not Tory, Labour, Lib Dem, Green, SNP, all these parties that are working in lockstep together to ruin our country and bring in Agenda 2030. Let's step up and give people a choice. So I hope that, more and more people will do. You see, on the 4th of May, we've got local elections. I mean, we're getting strong. We're getting groups and teams together, in some places, in Devon, in Surrey, in Sussex, in Kent, and other places. We're really, getting teams of significant numbers together to make challenges in certain districts, which is I'm very, very excited about. But I want that to happen over the whole country, and to, wherever there are elections as well. So I hope that people, will get involved and realize that together we have the power. There might be 200,000 or 300,000 change agents, but there's 10 to 20 million people who know there's something wrong, who could get together and do something about it. So, my plea is just, please come and get involved and at least give it a try, and we can take back our country and restore our nation.
I think things have been highlighted more recently with what's going on with these low traffic neighborhoods, because they are extremely unpopular. And I think they've exposed this lack of consultation, which I've been talking about for years, actually.
Yeah.
But because this is such an imposition now, I think we're in the sort of third act of what's going on, and it's starting to really hot up. So I think people are getting more aware of that, but I still don't think that they know the level of it. And that's the thing. So if you're campaigning locally, what are people saying about these LTNs? What are you finding though? Are you finding that it's like 60% against or 100% against? What you're getting?
Almost everybody hates them. I mean,
yeah.
We have them in London.
Yeah,
I was on the London Assembly. They've been imposed for 3 or 4 years. I mean, you mentioned Waltham Forest and
that was in 2014. That one,
yeah,
they sort of tried it. Yes.
No, the businesses didn't like it, the people didn't like it, but you had a hardcore of sort of green activists and cycling activists who were very, very noisy and well funded, and they actually, they basically astroturfed it through. They had the media, the local media, the London media. They loved the scheme, and they were promoting it all the time as something that the community wanted. Well, actually, the real grassroots, if you like, the real people, the real community didn't want it at all. They hated it. But particularly businesses, people couldn't drive their cars anymore and park outside businesses where they used to do, and essentially they blocked the roads off and made it harder for people to drive, and then so they could bring in social change, which people didn't want. So those were some of the first places it happened. And then you had all of these LTNs coming in under the emergency legislation, the coronavirus legislation. Right. So they said, we have to do this to keep people safe, which is another massive calumny massive lie and deception. But nobody wanted them. Well, there may be a small number of people who wanted them, but the vast majority came out, demonstrating, all together. People.
I think this is a really strong point to campaign on, because when this happened in Walthamstow, thousands of people turned up outside the town hall and they tried to play that down. Everything had already been captured, though, because you had a local newspaper come in, which was made up just about the time that Mini Holland happened, to tell people what they were getting, not to ask them if they wanted it, to tell them what was coming. And then through the consultations were completely phony. But now it's become absolutely exposed. So I think this is a really strong area to campaign on now, because there's a real anger against it. And that has to be directed properly, because these groups and the way this system works, because it's stakeholder orientated. So you've got the Sustrans, is this organization that pushes the cycling lobbies. And when I found out about this, there's so many of these people embedded. And what people have to do is realize that they have to actually make a public stance against it, because all of the social media is controlled by these people. They have their own pages set up for it, and they become agitation groups. I mean, I don't think a lot of people realize how close they are to communism in the UK. I mean, to me, it's already communist in the main. The people just need to realize that the system they're under is not the system they think they're under. What do you think about that?
Yeah, well, I mean, again, you mentioned there's the NGOs like Sustrans and whatever, and you've got others acting in different areas. I mean, you've got Stonewall acting in another area and so on. But all of these things, a lot of them, or perhaps most of them, are funded by the government. And then with the funds they get from the government, from taxpayers' money, they then lobby the government for the policies that the government wants to bring in. So it's like a closed loop of funded government to the NGOs, back to the government, and so on. So then they all respond to the consultations the government's putting out, and then they say, oh, we're an NGO, so we've got a title, and we have done some research work showing why we should have these mini Hollands, or why we should bring RSE into schools or whatever. And then the government says, oh, well, they responded to the consultation, and they have more weight than lots of individual people who responded, who are actually genuine people who live in the area. And then the government says, well, that's where we're going to do it. So it's a closed loop, and it's absolutely wrong that the government should be funding NGOs that then take a political position and lobby the government in order to bring in the policies that they want to bring in. So what I would say is that the government shouldn't be funding any NGOs whatsoever. It's totally defund NGOs and quangos. They can then get their own money, and they shouldn't be allowed to lobby the government, and take political positions.
Yeah, these are things that I think people need to be really aware of as well, because I don't think people realize that the local council level is where this all happens. It is global to local. I know I keep saying this, but the local council is where you've got to go. You have to call these people out and expose what they're doing. And the thing is that this has been going on for such a long time now. So it'd be interesting to see how much support you can get. Is there anything else that you want to actually put out to people?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good point you just made, because local council elections, local elections are so important. Often in politics, people are just so focused on the government in Westminster, but your local councils are local government. They have as much impact over your life in your local area as the national government does in the spheres of influence they have. But the turnout for local elections is dire. It's maybe half of the turnout for the Westminster elections. That needs to change. We have such an opportunity if we all get involved, because the turnout is generally so low among people who would actually be politically engaged all the time. We have a great opportunity to just come in great numbers and do something new. So let's do it. And getting involved at the local level, then you can make huge changes. I mean, they're all over the country. There's these new cycle schemes, the LTNs, the road blockages coming on. There's now sort of climate alarmism coming into building regulations. So I hear all over the place, councils are trying to knock down old buildings after running them down, and then building these new horrible carbuncles. But of course, a lot of property developers make masses and masses of money out of knocking down the old historic buildings that are part of our heritage and building a new tower block. So they love it. And the people that are related to some of the councillors in some places make a lot of money. We got to stop this from happening, to save our nation, to save our heritage, even to save the physical, look of our towns and cities, the beauty of our towns and cities and our countryside. If we don't want them to be plastered over with solar panels and wind turbines and horrible new blocks of flats everywhere, and housing developments which local people don't need, and low traffic neighborhoods and road blockages. If we want to stop that, you've got to get involved. Stand to be a councillor, boot out these people, and let's put in people who really do care about our nation and care about the people, and we can stop it. But everyone's got to get involved, and it doesn't take much to get involved. So that's what I'd say. Again, just please consider that. And on a local level, it's much easier to get involved than on a national level. I mean, it's free to stand for election, and there's less media scrutiny of you as a candidate, but you can make an immense difference to your town, your district, your county if you get involved.
That's very true. And the thing is that 5 years ago, it was known that well over 100 councillors in the UK had direct ties to property companies, property developers. That shouldn't even be allowed, obviously. It's a complete conflict of interest. But also, the Haringey development vehicle was brought down. That was the plan was that Lendlease, this Australian multinational company, was going to own and manage half of the infrastructure of Haringey, 52%. And that got turned down in the High Court. I mean, the thing is that if more people got involved, this would actually fall down, the whole of it, because it's all based on a massive fraud. But the thing is, that fraud is very well funded and very well protected. So good luck on that, David. And yeah, thanks for that. It was quite a concise interview, and I think people might have got the idea of what the Heritage Party is about. So thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you. Really good to join you on the show. And great. I hope everyone's enjoyed listening.
Great.